Hello friends, I'm Ben. Today I want to talk to you about a very special companion, someone almost all of us have met, though few want to admit it. Their name is debt. Some think of unpaid bills. Some think of those long student loans. Others think of sleepless nights when the credit card bill comes due and your bank account barely has a few $100s left. In over 20 years of working in personal finance, I've met hundreds, even thousands of people in the same situation. And believe me, they're not irresponsible. They're not careless with money. They're simply human trying to live, to stay balanced in a world full of pressure, advertising, and social expectations. She worked 2 jobs by day, an office assistant by night, a delivery driver, just to pay off her credit card debt. When I asked what exhausts you the most, she didn't mention money. She said, "I'm tired of feeling like I'll never be free." Because it wasn't just Lisa's story, it was the story of millions of people. People trapped in a cycle where debt doesn't just take money, it steals peace, freedom, and sometimes even self-worth. It makes you feel small, powerless, sometimes even ashamed. But here's the truth, debt is not the enemy. It's not good or bad, it just reflects how we use it. Like a knife in a kitchen, the same blade that can create a beautiful meal can also cause harm in the wrong hands. Debt is the same way. For those who understand it, it becomes a ladder to climb higher. For those without a plan, it becomes chains that hold them down. He sighed, "Ben, I'm 45, I have a house, a car, a good job, but I feel like a prisoner." I asked why. He said, "Because none of it is truly mine. Everything I own is borrowed." Then he went silent. And so did I, because I understood. Debt can make us believe we own our lives when in reality our lives are owned by the loans we carry. It begins with emotions, with the need to prove we're enough, with the fear of falling behind, or the pressure to keep up appearances. I've met young people buried in debt not because they lacked money, but because they wanted to look successful: new cars, the latest phones, fancy dinners, designer clothes. And then they realize the real cost isn't interest, it's the years spent under pressure and anxiety. Because only when you've felt the suffocation of debt can you truly understand the meaning of freedom. Only when you've lost sleep over money can you appreciate a morning of peace when your account is balanced and you can finally whisper, "It's getting better." She owed nearly $74,000 in student loans and credit card debt. At one point, she thought her life would never recover. But instead of running, she faced it. She learned to plan, to distinguish between good debt and bad debt, to automate her savings, to track every expense, and to stay consistent. 4 years later, she paid it all off, built an emergency fund, and bought her own small apartment. Every morning, she makes a cup of coffee, looks out her window, and tells me, "Ben, I'm finally free." It comes from understanding your relationship with money. Debt can be a burden, yes, but it can also be a lesson, a turning point that helps you grow. Debt isn't the period at the end of your story. It's just a comma, a pause in the sentence of your growth. I've also seen people rise from it stronger, wiser, and more at peace. The difference isn't in the numbers, it's in the mindset. And that's what we'll explore together in the next parts: how to understand debt, how to tell the difference between good and bad debt, and most importantly, how to live peacefully even when you still owe. And if you're in debt today, don't blame yourself. See it as a reminder, a chance to start again stronger and wiser. Because on the journey from debt to freedom, the most precious thing you'll ever earn is peace of mind. There's something fascinating I've learned after decades of helping people, from fresh graduates to retirees, manage their finances. Debt isn't always the enemy. Sounds strange, right? Because most of us are taught that debt is something to avoid, a sign of failure. But the truth is, debt only reflects how you use money. It says nothing about your worth as a person. In the hands of a chef, it's a tool to create a delicious meal. But in the hands of someone angry, it can be dangerous. Debt is the same. The same loan can be a stepping stone for someone who understands it, or a burden for someone who doesn't. Debt is dangerous. But the older I got, the more I realized life isn't that black and white. Not all debt is bad. Some debt can actually bring you closer to your financial goals and even personal freedom. I call that smart debt. For example, borrowing to buy a home, whether you live in it or rent it out, can be good debt. A home can grow in value over time while also giving you stability and a potential source of income. I once had a client, my financial patient, as I like to call them, named Jake, 32 years old, an auto mechanic. He borrowed $15,000 to take a course in automotive electronics. People said he was reckless, but 2 years later, he had doubled his income and opened his own shop. Jake told me if I hadn't taken that loan, I'd still be running errands in someone else's garage. It's like planting seeds for your future: sacrifice today, grow tomorrow. That's bad debt. You know what I mean, the "I want it now" kind of spending vacations beyond budget. expensive gifts or luxury purchases just to impress others. Together, they made $9,000 a month, but were always broke. When I reviewed their finances, they had 3 car loans, 4 credit cards, and a personal loan just to throw their kid a huge birthday party. They weren't greedy, they were loving parents. But what they didn't see was that bad debt often wears the mask of love, joy, and deservedness. And the cost, sleepless nights arguments, and stress creeping into family dinners. The wife looked down. The husband sighed, because deep down they knew happiness bought on credit rarely lasts. But borrowing to buy a luxury car just to feel successful, that's consumer debt. And here's the truth, most consumer debt comes from emotion, not real need. And advertisers know this better than anyone. They make you believe you deserve that new phone, that exotic vacation, or that designer outfit to treat yourself. And when you let emotions control your wallet, you become a victim of your own desire to feel worthy. After early retirement, he started using credit cards to maintain his lifestyle. In just 3 years, he accumulated nearly $40,000 in debt. When we talked, he said, "Ben, I don't know how I got here. I just wanted to feel like I was still doing okay." You're in debt because of emotion? Over time, he began to see debt as a mirror, a reflection of how he felt about himself. They fall into debt because they want to be loved, respected, or valued. And that's why I often say, to get out of debt, you don't just need to change how you spend. You need to change how you see yourself. If you're using debt to invest in yourself, build a future, or create income, embrace it. Good debt is the tool that helps the middle class rise and gives ordinary people a shot at their dreams. The mistake is letting debt control you. When you can tell the difference between good and bad debt, you begin to take back control. That's the first step from worry to peace, from debt to freedom. It can build a bridge or dig a hole. It all depends on who's holding it. Because debt isn't just about numbers, it's about emotion, self-worth, and how we face ourselves. If you've ever been in debt or are trying to pay one off, you know, that feeling better than anyone. Debt isn't just about money, it's about emotion. It doesn't live only in your bank account. It lives in your thoughts, your sleep, your meals, and those quiet conversations you have with yourself. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shout. But it's there in every decision you make. It makes you hesitate before buying a cup of coffee. It makes you afraid to open your mail. It makes you avoid talking to your spouse about money. And most of all, it makes you doubt yourself. He said, "Ben, I owe almost $92,000. Every morning I wake up, look around my house, and all I see is pressure. It doesn't feel like a home anymore. It feels like a beautifully painted prison." Because I knew he wasn't just talking about debt. He was talking about losing freedom, the kind that makes you feel trapped, even when you're still breathing. I said, it's not the number, it's the emotion tied to it. They think they've failed, that they're weak or less capable. Then shame turns into fear. Fear of judgment, fear of letting family down, fear of admitting the truth. And when fear grows, they begin to avoiding bank emails, ignoring statements, pretending the problem doesn't exist. The cycle goes on, and the deeper they fall. "It's just a situation," she cried. She said no one had ever told her that before. For years, she blamed herself, believing she had ruined her life and her children's. But when she started seeing debt as a lesson instead of a scar, something shifted. She became calmer. And once her mind was free, she finally had the strength to make a plan and start paying it off. When you're happy, you spend more. When you're sad, you buy something to feel better. And when you feel like a failure, you spend to prove your worth. That's how debt grows silently without us noticing. Their minds are clouded with worry, leading to more mistakes. In other words, debt doesn't just hurt your wallet, it hurts your thinking and emotions. The amygdala in your brain processes fear, while the nucleus accumbens creates pleasure. When you're anxious about debt, your brain seeks comfort, often through spending, to escape the stress. But that relief is temporary. Soon after, guilt sets in. And the cycle repeats until you learn to understand your emotions instead of running from them. Luxury car, big house, fancy trips, lavish dinners. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But he said, "Ben, I'm not happy anymore. I'm just living to maintain an image." The only light is your phone screen showing a negative balance. Every time you look at it, your heart races. You feel trapped, scared, and alone. And you wonder, will I ever get out of this? Does anyone understand me? Will this ever end? And the light doesn't come from money, it comes from courage. The courage to flip the switch. That switch is facing the truth. When you open the letter, when you check the balance, when you call the bank, when you talk to your partner, you're taking back control. Debt stops controlling you because you're finally looking it in the eye. Avoidance feels comfortable for a while, but it's like throwing a blanket over a fire, it still burns underneath. You don't just need a spreadsheet, you need patience, discipline, and self-respect. Learning to say no to temptations disguised as rewards. Learning to sit down, breathe deeply, and remind yourself, I'm doing this for my future, not out of fear. They'd say I was so stupid. If only I'd known sooner. But the truth is, we've all made mistakes. We've all been weak. Financial life is like any journey. There are turns, lessons, and scars. What matters is what you learn from them. See it as an opportunity to learn about yourself, your habits, your emotions, and what truly matters to you. Debt can knock you down, but it can also become your greatest teacher, showing you how to live slower, think clearer, and appreciate deeper. Because financial freedom doesn't start in your wallet, it starts in your mind. 4 steps to break free from debt. The journey from pressure to freedom. It's a journey of awareness, discipline, and courage. I've seen countless people succeed in becoming debt-free, not because they made more money, but because they changed how they thought and how they acted. These are the same 4 steps that helped hundreds of people I've coached, from those drowning in credit card or student loan debt to families who thought they'd lost everything, find peace, freedom, and confidence again. It sounds simple, but it's actually the hardest part. Because most people borrow more not out of necessity, but because they haven't yet learned how to live within their means. Every time they maxed out one credit card, they opened another to pay off the first one and earn rewards. When we sat down together, they had 11 cards and were paying over $1, $200 a month in interest. I asked when the last time was that they bought something they truly needed. They looked at each other and stayed silent. Pause the habit of borrowing to survive today. Pause the urge to buy to feel better, and stop hiding the truth behind clever excuses. Sometimes peace is worth more than profit. If you're in debt, the best thing you can do today is draw a line in the sand. I won't borrow another dollar until I pay off what I already owe. Cancel unnecessary credit cards. Keep one card for essentials only. And give yourself permission to say no, because every time you say no to debt, you say yes to freedom. Once you've stopped digging deeper, the next step is to start climbing out. And to climb, you need a strategy. But a good payoff plan only needs 3 things: simplicity, consistency, and emotional connection. You focus on your smallest balance, pay it off, then use that momentum to attack the next one. Each win builds your motivation like a rolling snowball. You see quick results, which helps you stay on track. This one is for the logical minds. It saves more money in interest, but it takes longer to feel progress. If you need motivation, go with Snowball. If you value optimization, choose Avalanche. The key is don't stay still. He chose Snowball. In 6 months, he paid off 3 small debts just under $6,000, but he told me, for the first time in years, I feel in control. 3 years later, he was debt-free. What changed his life wasn't math, it was the feeling of winning small battles. One of the biggest mistakes people make is using every dollar to pay off debt without setting aside anything for emergencies. The problem is life never sticks to the plan. Cars break down, kids get sick, jobs disappear. And without an emergency fund, you'll borrow again, and the cycle starts over. Don't aim for 6 months of expenses right away. Start with $1,000. That's your first milestone. From there, build to 3 months, then 6. One of my clients, Sarah, lost her job suddenly during the pandemic. Thanks to her $5,000 emergency fund, she had time to find a new position without taking on debt. She told me, I realized freedom isn't about having more money. It's about having time to breathe when life changes. Remember, your emergency fund isn't for spending, it's for peace of mind. Many people fail to stay debt-free because they rely on willpower. But willpower fades, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it tires. The smarter way is to build discipline into your system, not your mood. Automatic savings set 10% of your paycheck to move directly into savings. Automatic budgeting, split your income into separate accounts for essentials, fun, and savings. She said, I try every month, but halfway through I lose control. I helped her set up 3 accounts with automation. 3 months later, she emailed me, Ben, for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty spending. I know exactly where every dollar goes. And when emotions step aside, clarity steps in. Don't wait until you're ready. Start even when you're scared, even when you're unsure. Because financial freedom doesn't arrive overnight. It's built one decision, one action, one day at a time. There will be days you're tired, frustrated, or tempted to give up. When that happens, remember why you started. Remember the weight debt once had on your shoulders. Remember the sleepless nights, the arguments, the pressure. I've seen that look in hundreds of faces, the mix of pride, relief, and gratitude. Because they realized they didn't just pay off debt, they reclaimed themselves. It's the door to a new beginning, a life lived with awareness, peace, and gratitude. And if you're in that journey right now, let me tell you, you're doing it right. Even if it's slow, even if it's hard, you're moving toward freedom. Because paying off debt is just the start. Living free, that's the destination. Building a new life after debt, freedom, fulfillment, and peace. It's an opportunity to live differently, think differently, and see life through a new light. I always tell people who've paid off their debt, being debt-free isn't the end, it's the first chapter of freedom. You've spent years worrying, tracking balances, cutting back. When that weight disappears, it can feel strange, even hollow. But that's when you have a chance to rebuild your relationship with money. I remember a woman named Helen, 46, whom I guided for 5 years as she paid off nearly $120,000. When she made her final payment, she didn't throw a party or splurge. She sat quietly in a cafe and wrote, "Freedom tastes like silence." Because true financial freedom isn't loud. It's not about having more, it's about no longer being afraid to lose. The first thing to learn after debt is to live with purpose, not habit. For years, every decision revolved around paying debt. Now it's time to rediscover your why. But I also realize I forgot what I truly want. When you live too long under financial pressure, you forget how to dream. So the first step after debt is to redefine freedom. Freedom isn't just the absence of debt, it's the ability to spend in alignment with who you are. For some, it means more time with family. For others, it means investing and building wealth. And for many, freedom simply means spending with awareness. Imagine this: every dollar you earn no longer goes toward paying off the past, it builds your future. You no longer say, "I have to." You say, "I choose to." I have to pay bills. I choose to invest in myself. I have to save. I choose to live with purpose. Just a few words change everything because they remind you that the power is back in your hands. The second step is to enjoy life without losing awareness. After paying off debt, many people swing the other way. They spend more because they deserve it. I've seen this countless times, and it often leads right back to debt. I'm not saying you shouldn't celebrate. You should, but with intention. I once helped a client named Jenny create a small joy fund. Each month, she set aside 5% of her income for simple pleasures: dinner with friends, a good book, a movie night. It allowed her to enjoy life without guilt. She told me, "For the first time, I can spend money and still feel proud of it." You don't need to spend thousands to feel happy. A quiet morning, a warm cup of coffee, a favorite song, those can be enough. Peace doesn't require luxury, it requires mindfulness. The third step is to keep saving and investing even when you're debt-free. Many people think the journey ends once the debt is gone, but that's just the beginning. If paying off debt teaches you how to survive, then saving and investing teach you how to grow. Start by building an emergency fund for 6 months of expenses if you haven't already. Then begin long-term investing. You don't need to be a financial expert. Start small with retirement accounts, index funds, or automatic investment plans. The goal isn't to get rich fast, it's to let money work for you instead of you working for it forever. I once coached a man named Samuel. After becoming debt-free, he started investing $300 a month automatically into his retirement fund. 15 years later, that small habit had doubled his savings. He said, "Ben, it was just the cost of one dinner a month, but it bought me peace of mind for the rest of my life." The fourth step is to share your story. Debt can be a lonely journey, but it can also inspire others. I always tell my clients, your story might be the light for someone still in the dark. After becoming debt-free, she started blogging about her experience, the sleepless nights, the tears, the joy of seeing a zero balance. Her words reached thousands of people, and many began their own journeys because of her. Lisa told me, "I thought my story was something to be ashamed of. But when I shared it, I realized it was a gift." Sharing keeps you grounded and grateful. When you tell your story, you not only help others, you remind yourself of how far you've come. Finally, the most important part: protect your peace. Many people pay off debt but remain unhappy, still trapped by the fear of falling back. They control too tightly, save excessively, and forget to live. But remember, money isn't meant to be feared. It's meant to be lived with. If you've learned the lesson, if your mindset has changed, trust yourself, you won't go back. Allow yourself to live lightly. Believe you deserve peace. Because true freedom isn't just being debt-free, it's gratitude for every day you have. Picture this. You wake up one morning. No bills. No calls from collectors. You pour a cup of coffee, sit by the window, sunlight on your face. You're not rich, but you feel enough. That's real financial freedom, not a number in a bank account, but peace in your heart. This journey may be long, it may be hard, but every step is worth it. Because in the end, becoming debt-free doesn't just give you financial freedom, it gives you back yourself. In the final part, I'll share the deepest lessons I've learned from decades of helping people rebuild after debt and how they turned years of struggle into a journey of growth, happiness, and lasting peace. The final lesson, when financial freedom becomes inner freedom. Each one has their own story, their own struggles, their own lessons. But what has always moved me the most isn't how much they paid off. It's how they grew wiser, calmer, and more at peace. He came to me at the lowest point of his life, unemployed, divorced, and buried under $90,000 in credit card debt. He said, "Ben, I used to think I had it all. Now I feel like I've lost everything." I didn't start with money. I asked George, "Do you remember the last time you were truly happy?" They fear losing meaning. And once they rediscover that meaning, everything changes. To cook again, to sleep again, to smile again. 5 years later, he was debt-free, living near his daughter, and running a small repair shop. When I saw him again, he smiled and said, "I'm not rich, but I feel enough." But once you overcome it, you realize freedom comes from simplicity. Freedom is sitting quietly on a peaceful afternoon with a cup of coffee, not worrying about bills, not comparing yourself to anyone. Freedom is looking at your bank account and smiling, not because it's big, but because it's truly yours. I just want to live simply. And I thought that's what debt teaches us, to slow down, to be grateful, and to choose peace over excess. But those who've been through debt know better. You might owe money, but that doesn't make you worthless. You might make mistakes, but that doesn't make you a failure. When I met her, she owed nearly $50,000 in student loans and credit card debt. She said, "I feel ashamed. I teach discipline, but I can't seem to live it." I told her, "Susan, what makes you strong isn't that you're debt-free, it's that you're facing it head-on." 3 years later, she paid off her debt-built savings and started teaching her students about personal finance. She turned her pain into purpose. That's when I realized true strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising every time you do. I've seen couples divorce because of debt, parents grow distant from children because of financial stress. But I've also seen couples who fought through it together and came out stronger. When they came to me, they owed $75,000 and barely spoke to each other. But instead of blaming, they chose to rebuild. They tracked expenses together, saved together, and celebrated each payment. 3 years later, they were debt-free. Mike told me, "Ben, I thought I was getting my money back, but I got my marriage back." I'll never forget that line. See it as your new foundation. Use what you've learned to live more consciously. Teach your children the value of work, of saving, of freedom. Share your story to help others still where you once were. When you understand it, you begin to see that the real treasure is peace of mind. It was a strict teacher showing you discipline, gratitude, and patience. Those who've carried debt know the value of every dollar, every breath, every peaceful night's sleep. They appreciate life more deeply than most. Wherever you are, no matter how much you owe, no matter how afraid you feel, just start. Pause. Look at the real numbers. Write your first small plan. Pay one bill 1 month, one step at a time, not to prove anything, but to reclaim your peace. Forgive yourself for past mistakes. Promise yourself that money will never control your soul again. Somewhere out there, someone is sitting in the dark of fear and hopelessness, waiting to hear your words. Sometimes one story, one sentence can save a weary heart. You will too. It begins in your mind, and when your mind is free, your life truly transforms.